and a warm welcome to you. I'm Sarah Hutchinson, and this is streaming live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you just pop into the comments, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, please, just so that we can see whether the comments are working, that would be great. And I'm just going to give it just a couple more seconds just for a few more people to join, and I'll make a start. So hopefully that's everybody just about joined. So again, hello and welcome. And just to let you know that this webinar today is being recorded. So welcome to Unlock the Secrets on how to export and import successfully. So I'm Sarah Hutchinson, and I've worked in international trade for over 37 years. I started my career working for manufacturing businesses in the export and sales departments. And I was really lucky because one of the companies I worked for, I was responsible for shipping explosives to the Middle East. And this was quite a challenge, but it was a bit of a baptism by fire, I guess, and excusing the pun, because that gave me was knowledge of complicated letters of credit, because it was involved with the Middle East, military licenses because the goods were explosives, and dangerous goods as well. So I got a really good feeling for just how complicated export can become. And part of the sales side of what I did, I felt that was something I wanted to further develop into my career, and I started applying for full-time sales jobs. And again, I was really lucky because actually the first one I was offered was with a freight forwarder. So that took me off to Southampton, and there I worked for a number of freight forwarders around the UK, and from the big boys, large, medium and small. And again, it gave me a good grounding. I got some great training along the way. And I also traveled extensively overseas. And from a freight forwarder's point of view, that's great because you tend to think that everything happens overseas the way it does here, and it doesn't. And just getting the opportunity to see those little things that happen their side, those little nuances, the differences, even in terminology and how it's approached, really helped me in my career. And then I decided, well, actually, if I'm going to work this hard, I'm going to work this hard for myself. And 23 years ago, I set up my own freight business, Risa, and we move clients' goods all over the world every day of the week. And off the back of that, we also set up training and consultancy, because we see a lot of areas where exporters and importers make avoidable mistakes because they don't understand everything that there is to understand. And it's quite a challenging industry because the change, and particularly over the last 3 to 4 years, the changes have been constant. And when it's not your full-time job, it is hard to stay up to date with those changes. And as part of the training that we do, I will speak about this later on, if that's okay. Once a quarter, I offer the Logistics Mastery, a roadmap to profitable global trade. It's 10 workshops that I deliver online and covering all of the things that you need to know, very practical advice, again, seen on by the mistakes that we see importers and exporters made and could be avoided with that knowledge. And so I'll speak about that later for anybody that's interested in taking part in the next series of webinars and workshops. So the content of today's webinar I've taken from the workshop series. And this is the first thing we're going to look at, which comes from the freight forwarding fundamentals. And it's around calculating your correct chargeable weight. when many freight forwarders will give you monthly charges for their updated rates, and it is very easy to make the mistake when you look at those rates and calculate them if you're not looking at the volumetric weight of your goods and checking that on any moves that you have, either exports or imports. And to explain why it's important is that we as freight forwarders, we buy space on aeroplanes, boats, we fill lorries, and everything is looked at, that space is looked at in how can we fill that space with the volume of it, and also how can we maximize the total amount of weight that we're allowed for the space that we're buying. And that's what this is all about. And by the three main transport modes, this changes depending on whether it's air, sea or road. So for air freight, for every 1,000 kilos of weight that you can have up to 6 cubic meters of space. Sea freight is actually the same. The weight and the volume is the same. Road freight, 1,000 kilos, you can have up to 3 cubic meters of space. So on the example that I've put up on this slide, this shipment is 1,021 kilos and it's 15 cubic meters of volume. And depending whether it moves by air, sea or road, as you can see there, the chargeable kilos, for example, on the air freight, at 1,021 physical gross kilos, you would actually be charged at 2,490. So if you were using a quote, a schedule of charges that a freight forwarder had sent over to you for that month, for those rates, you would be, well, more than 1,470 odd kilos out, and that would be a lot of money. The same if you look at road freight, again, you would be charged by 4,995 volume kilos, not the 1,021 actual kilos. It also gets more complicated when you look at terminal handling charges. This would be for like loading and unloading of lorries and containers. That's charged for every 1,000 kilos to 2 cubic meters invariably. It will change slightly between forwarders because we can do whatever we want on those charges. And collection and deliveries, often you'll see that for every 1,000 kilos of weight, you can have 2.265 cubic meters. So you've got to look at various different stages what that chargeable weight would be. So the solution, what we do as a company is every quote that we send out, it's a lump sum for that specific order that's being quoted on. And we'll only itemize it if the client asks us to do that. But that way, no mistakes are made. And, you know, you're not, this is where profit can be eroded very, very quickly if you don't understand what you're doing. Also from the freight forwarding and fundamental workshop, looking at non-stackable freight, we regularly are asked not to stack customers' orders, purchases coming in from overseas. And this is a problem, again, for a freight forwarder, because if we can't load on that space above the pallet, the cases, whatever they are, of course, that costs us money. So a freight forwarder will charge you based on loading meters. And what I've done here, I've shown you an example of a Euro pallet, which is 120 by 180 at 476 kilos worth of goods going on to that pallet. So the way that particular, if there was one pallet going at those dimensions and at that weight, full of goods, you would take the length and the width, so 1.2 in meters by 0.8, which gives you 0.96. You divide that by 2.4, which is the width of a lorry, and that would give you, for this pallet, 0.4 loading meters. And you will be charged 1,850 kilos per loading meter or per minimum shipment. So in this case, you would be charged 1,850 kilos as opposed to 476 kilos. So again, it's important to know, and it's a case of what other options could you look at? Could you maybe put a reinforced cardboard topper on top of the goods that you're shipping on this pallet? Is there other ways that you could secure it, which would cost you less than the difference between 1,850 kilos as opposed to 476 kilos of actual gross weight on the pallet? Now here, looking at from the Import Insights workshop, last year HMRC came out to all freight forwarders and asked us to speak to our clients and to tell them that valuation method 1 would be the method we will use for import customs clearances if they don't instruct us in any other direction. And there's 6 methods you can use, but you have to use them. You have to say why you can't use the first and why you're using the second. And if you can't use the second, why it's the third, and so on. The main 2 that we see are valuation method 1 or valuation method 2. 1 is the transaction value, the commercial invoice value of the goods. So if you're importing, it's what you've paid your supplier. Transaction value 2 is based on the value of identical goods if you're not actually buying them. So this could be used where it's free of charge goods, if it's samples, because you can't just put on an invoice free of charge or even nominal value for customs purposes, £10. From HMRC's point of view, they want to know what actually are those goods worth. They're not bothered about the fact that they're free of charge or there might be samples, for example. Whatever the duty should be on those goods, they want that. And we on our customs entry will put down the customs value that those goods are, and duty would still be paid on that amount of, as a percentage of whatever the goods tariff heading commodity code is. So just to say on that, it is important that you do tell your freight forwarder which valuation method you want them to use for your goods. Again, from Import Insights, what else needs to be included within your transaction value, your commercial invoice? We had a new client join us some years ago now, and I'm always interested to find out what challenges businesses have. I'm always looking, what solutions are there? What are the problems? And they said to us that their problem was HMRC, and it transpired that they were having customs visits, customs audits every year, and this came from this particular example whereby they're an importer of giftware, and every year they launch a complete new range, and as part of that range, their manufacturers in China and the US have to make new tooling for all of the molds and everything for the products they're going to import. And during the first inspection that they had, their first audit, one of the invoices, which was for tens of thousands of pounds, was picked up by HMRC, and it hadn't been allowed for within the first customs entry. And they then went back 7 years through all of the tooling requirements that they paid for and hadn't declared, and they had a massive bill and a fine from HMRC. So if you make any periodic payments, monthly, quarterly, annually, license fees, anything like that, they should be included in the first customs entry that's made for the first import of those goods. Or again, tooling charges, if there's engineering fees, development costs, if you're including training as part of what you're doing, if you're commissioning something or someone's coming here to commission a piece of machinery and you're going to be trained on it, then again, you need, if you're paying for that and it's part of the overall bill, then you need to declare that and say that. And if it hasn't been within the first invoice and it's only for the goods, then you need to tell your freight forwarder how much that is, so it's included in that first import. So under Incoterms Demystified, I've brought one up here, which is Ex Works, and this is probably one of the most talked about terms of sale because it's the easiest to use from an exporter's point of view, because of course you don't have to do anything. It's the price of the goods that you're selling and you're invoicing, and your customer overseas is paying for the freight forwarder that they're engaging with to bring those goods from wherever you've sold them from, usually your factory or a warehouse, wherever you've got them stored, to wherever they want them delivered. But there's a big question around whether or not Ex Works should be used for international trade. It's a complicated term because it takes in elements of customs, commercial, and VAT law. And where the seller makes the goods available to the buyer without transport, the International Chamber of Commerce have actually said that this should be a domestic term and not used for international. And one of the biggest reasons for that is the fact that you, the exporter, lose control of your goods the minute that that vehicle that's collecting them leaves your warehouse, your yard, whatever it is. You actually don't know that they are ever going to be exported or where they're going next. And from a VAT perspective, so this is where the VAT law comes in, if you cannot prove that the goods departed from the country, and there's only one document that will show that, and that's an S8, that's from the chief system, and that is moving over to CDS very, very soon. So it will be a different document from there. But at the moment, it is still the S8 that you'll get. Without that document, if the VAT people come in or HMRC come in, and audit it, they will charge you the VAT because your invoice is VAT-free because it's an export. But because you cannot prove and demonstrate by the S8 that they have left this country, they will come back, they will charge you the VAT and most likely fine you as well because you can't prove that. It doesn't matter if you've got reams of correspondence between you and your customer about buying the goods, you've got an invoice and everything else. It's just about the fact you can't prove from a VAT perspective that those goods actually left this country. So free carrier is a solution to this, and it doesn't mean that you have to take on the responsibility of the cost of getting the goods from your premises or warehouse to the freight forwarder that's going to be nominated to handle it. What you can do free carrier wherever the goods are. So for example, we're based in Grantham, so we could say free carrier Grantham, and the freight forwarder will still come and pick them up from us. However, the customs clearance under free carrier is your responsibility. So you will be engaging with a freight forwarder to arrange the export customs clearance. It will be in your name and they will provide you, because they're working for you, with that departed document. And for companies, you've got to think as well, if you've got to get this proof for every export you do, if you're doing 10, 15 exports a week, that can become a full-time job for someone. It's not something that you're automatically going to be provided with. You're going to have to chase for that document under an Ex Works situation. So under navigating customs, codes and tariffs, just looking here at commodity codes and the importance of them, also around how the various different names that they're called: tariff codes, classification codes, HS codes, which is harmonized systems, tariff codes, tariff headings, and com codes. They all mean the same thing, but different people will call them all these different things. And when you're looking at a commodity code, there are 3 rules to follow, and they're the 3 W's. And that is, what is it? What type of product are you looking to export or import? What does it do, or what is it used for? And what is it made of, or the production method used to make that particular product. So taking all of those 3 into consideration, you would then go and look in the trade tariff. And on this particular module, I go through how we look up a commodity code and how that starting point, and breaking it down and breaking it down and breaking it down until you get either your 8 digits for your exports or your 10 digits for your imports. And also within the trade tariff, I'll show you where anti-dumping fits within that, and trade remedies. In fact, anti-dumping is now called trade remedies. And this is all around unfair practices that can harm our domestic industry. I've already mentioned we do quite a lot of giftware as one of our areas of expertise. And one of our clients, there's anti-dumping on mugs that are made in China, and this has been around for quite a few years now. And one of our clients put in writing to us that they wanted us to use a particular tariff heading, commodity code, whatever we want to call it, that didn't have the anti-dumping trade remedies on it. Now, we would always advise against that, but whatever, ultimately, an import customs clearance is yours. It's your responsibility. And if you tell your freight forwarder to do something and you put that in writing, they most likely will do it. So anyway, we used the tariff heading that they wanted us to use, and they had a customs audit, and they were fined, and they were charged the back duty under the anti-dumping that they should have paid. So, my thought is always you should pick the best code that describes your goods. Quotas, again, there may be products that you can import that are under quotas, which means that you can import a certain amount of those goods under a favourable rate of duty. And again, in the trade tariff, I'll show you where that is to see whether your goods are fall under the quotas under the reduced duty rates. Also, licenses. I mentioned about the explosives that I was involved with in the past, and again, an export license was needed for them, and that is shown in the trade tariff. And I say for exports, on your paperwork, you should show the first 8 digits, and for imports, the first 10 digits. So again, as I say, proceed with caution. The one thing with HMRC, when I first started, well, as you realise, many, many moons ago, there was people in departments that you could speak to, that you had phone numbers for people, and they were really, really helpful. This isn't so much the case now, and where you tend to find there are people are in the revenue generating departments, and commodity codes are one of those areas that they will look at where they know businesses are perhaps picking a code that has a lower rate of duty rather than the best one that describes your goods. HMRC, via your EORI number, know everything about what you're doing from an export and an import basis, and they use this to monitor businesses for whatever reason, if they feel they need to, and to monitor commodity codes for where people will deliberately pick a code with a cheaper rate of duty. And their records go back 20 years, so they've got good records to go back through. So under rules of origin, this became, rules of origin never seemed to be an issue prior to Brexit, but now it seems to have sort of just opened up a can of worms. So to explain origin does not necessarily mean the place where your goods are purchased. So you could buy something from a supplier in Europe, but actually they're made in the US. So it's important that you know where your goods are being made, the origin of them, and also anything you're exporting as well, the origins, the original origin of them. And the way that there's compliance around origin is that a product, you can demonstrate a product is either wholly originating from a market, or that you've taken component parts, transformed them into something quite different, let's say here in the UK, and that product, depending where all of those bits have come from, has now fallen within the rules of an originating product from GB, the UK. So to give you an example of number one, let's say we're importing shower curtains from China. So those shower curtains are made there, they're manufactured there, and if you think of them having a passport, so wherever they move in the world, that passport travels with them, and so long as they remain unaltered and still shower curtains, they will always have a China passport. So if you import them from China, your import customs clearance will show CN for China. If you then export them as part of your normal business operations, again, the country of origin will show China. The fact that they're supplied from GB is irrelevant. The second way of compliance within rules of origin is around significantly transforming a product. So that can be done in three ways. To completely change the commodity code. So the first four numbers of a commodity code, if you've made something with lots of different parts and your new whatever you've made has changed its commodity code and it is now four different numbers at the start, then you can say that they are GB origin goods. As part of the free trade agreement that we enjoy with the EU, if you have EU related goods and GB goods, and the value of the content of them within whatever product you're making is more than 51%, then that can be classed as GB EU origin goods and fall within the free trade agreement that we have with them. And the third one is if something's going through a specific process, and there are a number of goods that this would apply to, and I've given the example there of yarn. Although a jumper is still made from yarn, of course, you can't just wear the yarn, but once it's been made into a jumper, it can be worn. So again, that would be allowed within, if you brought the yarn into the country and you made jumpers, then they, here in the UK, then they could be GB origin. So looking at ensuring safe journeys, this covers off, this particular workshop covers off everything around packing and insurance, different types of pallets, or all of little nuances around what you can do with packaging. And before rules of origin sort of became a thing and a big thing, insurance was the one that seemed to be the most misunderstood of everything that we got involved with. And that is around the fact that your goods are not automatically insured. And this is where businesses will take, you've taken all that time to sell something, to get the order, you've made it, you've packed it, and then that journey from it leaving you to getting to your customer, for whatever reason, it gets damaged, it's lost, you could even say it's stolen. People just assume, or businesses presume, that their goods are automatically insured by a freight forwarder, and they're not. Or the small parcel operators, anybody, they're not. We all operate under standard terms and conditions, and most freight forwarders operate under BIFA standard trading terms and conditions. And under BIFA, for every kilo of damaged goods or lost goods, you would get back 2 SDRs. They're special drawing rights, and they are a quoted currency as such. And in this case, 2 SDRs, they're on the 16th of October last year, they were worth £2.16 each. So for every kilo of damage or loss, you would get back £4.32 per kilo. And in all my years of doing this, I've never seen a company where they've been advantaged by the SDR, standard trading terms and conditions. They've lost out as a result of that. So 3 tips here are to be clear by your Incoterms in terms of the ownership. When is it transferring from the seller to the buyer, and at what point are you responsible for the insurance of those goods? And well, I mean, let's put it this way, from what I've seen over the years, seen things happen. If I was moving my own goods around the world, they would always be insured. Also, don't scrimp on the packaging. I think we'll all recognise, like, if it's Christmas and you've opened up a gift and it's in a battered box, it's disappointing. If you go shopping, you're not going to buy a tin that's bashed. You're going to buy a tin of baked beans that's, perfect. You're going to put the bashed one back and pick up a perfect one. So the same with your packaging. Think about how you package your goods and understand they are handled multiple times. Often in excess of 10 times your goods will be handled in that process, from leaving you to being delivered to your customer, or leaving your suppliers and being delivered to you. The only time that they won't be is if you're loading full containers or importing full containers. That is a more secure way, and that the handling just doesn't happen on that. But that's not to say that you shouldn't be packing the containers with a high degree of thought in terms of the movement that those goods will go through. Because you don't want to be disappointed when something arrives here and it's damaged, and neither do your customers, because we all want repeat business. And to insure your goods for their full amount and to include the freight costs, your freight forwarder will invoice you for the movement of those goods, that journey, even if they are damaged. You will still get an invoice. And even if they're completely lost, you will still get an invoice from that freight forwarder. So by insuring your freight costs as well, what you'll find there is, you're going to get it back, and you're not going to be out of pocket on that. Now, yesterday I did send a message round about today's, or reminder for today's webinar, and I mentioned in it that I was going to discuss the Red Sea crisis. I think this is the biggest thing that's going on in international trade right now, and it's something that everybody needs to be on top of. It might not necessarily be that you're importing from Asia, from India, some of the Middle East countries, but if you're buying goods from companies here, they may be doing so, or indeed, if you are importing them as well, you've got the same problem. And this is the situation we've got, that the Houthi rebels from Yemen, who we believe are Iranian-backed, are attacking shipping vessels in the Red Sea. And on New Year's Eve, one of the Maersk vessels there was an attempt on an attack, and an American warship shot and killed a number of the rebels that were trying to get on board the Maersk vessel. As a result of this, what we're seeing is shipping lines, Maersk, MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company, they are diverting their vessels now via the Cape of Good Hope. And I've put a graphic in there just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about here in distance, and I'm covering here in terms of the cost that this is now causing. So if we looked at a journey time from Taiwan to the Netherlands, it's somewhere in the region of 10,500 nautical miles longer. And it's adding at least another 10 days of shipping time to these vessels. So what immediately for me, I feel this is a COVID situation that's racing towards us, where the vessels' schedules are now completely out of sync. And during COVID, it took at least 3 months for these vessels to get back on track where they should be. Of course, we had containers displaced because then they would omit ports of call. So you've got quite a few ports there that they're no longer calling at. So that's a problem, because there'll be containers there to be shipped that aren't being shipped. There'll be containers on those vessels that want to be dropped off there, that are destined for there, that aren't going to make it now. And what we saw during COVID was that they would pick somewhere like Rotterdam, and they would offload all of the containers there, and they would then need to make their way from there to wherever they're going to go in the world. And of course, since Brexit as well, they're less likely to pick Felixstowe, Southampton, London Gateway. They were more likely to omit those and go to mainland Europe and drop off the containers there, and then come here on feeder vessels. So the 10 days could well be 20, 25 days, depending what the shipping lines decide to do once they get to Europe and back on their normal scheduled route. Also, of course, we've got Chinese New Year. We're racing towards that. Normally at this time of year, we would be absolutely manic getting everything we can out of China before Chinese New Year. I expect to still be as busy this year trying to book the containers. How many slots we're going to get, I just don't know. It's really messing with the global supply chain. I read something earlier, and I've added that into the slide, that it's believed somewhere around 2.3 million extra cost per trip for it to go round the Cape of Good Hope, as opposed to through the Suez Canal. There is talk about some military escorts for the vessels. I've not seen anything come through actually confirming that. They were discussing it last night again on the BBC in terms of the impact that it's having on global shipping. But certainly in the last week, we have seen 20-foot containers go up by $2,500 US, and 40 and 40-foot high cube containers go up by $5,000. And I'm not expecting to see that to be it. I just think they'll keep rising and rising. It's also likely to affect oil prices, and it will impact consumers around the globe. And of course, higher shipping costs, higher prices for the goods, that's going to put some pressure back from an inflationary point of view, which again, as we start this new year, we don't want any more problems than we've absolutely need right now. I think we'll all agree we've had a few difficult years, and unfortunately this isn't a good start to 2024. So I did mention earlier on about the logistics mastery and the roadmap to profitable global trade. So these are the 10 workshops that I run. They're weekly and they're online. They're 1-hour workshops. And what I do on these is I do a real deep dive into, like, for example, freight forwarding fundamentals, looking at freight forwarders. There's over 2,000 of us here in the UK, and I talk about who the big boys are in the industry. And depending what your priorities are and looking at those, is it price, is it service, what's your best options, sort of where should you look to place the goods that you're exporting or importing. I've covered a little bit today on calculating the costs correctly so that you're not losing profit, or indeed that your customers are being charged more than they thought they were going to be. I do a whole section on export excellence, looking at documentation, HMRC requirements, consular requirements, ATA carnets, if you're shipping goods for exhibitions or something's going overseas, a machine's going over to be demonstrated and coming back. I talk about that. Your customs insights, again, looking at general systems of preference, valuations, your landed cost, calculating your duty and VAT. Week 4, I look at Incoterms, and I'd go into a deep dive on all of the Incoterms that would be used in international trade. Choosing them wisely. There are some real nuances around DDP. There are ways that you can export delivered duty paid, and I will talk through that and some of the regimes that can be used within Europe that will allow you to do that. But that, again, that all comes at a cost, which I will be highlighting. So we'll do a deep dive into some of the tariff headings and how you build up your tariff heading to get either the 8 or 10 digit number. HMRC, looking at customs declarations, the CDS system for exports. We're imminently about to go over to that, so that's something else that I will be looking and helping you with. The ways that you can pay HMRC now, rules of origin, I'll spend more time on that, and looking at free trade agreements. One thing since leaving Brexit our government has done is set up a lot of free trade agreements. So I'll be looking at those and what they mean to you as a business, and where you could take advantage of them, and hopefully from your competitor's point of view to understand what you can do differently to make you more competitive so that you're winning the orders. Special procedures in weekend, which I call customs magic. There are a lot of special procedures, like you've got returned good relief, you've got inward processing, you've got outward processing, simplified procedures which you can use to defer the duty that you pay, for example, when they first come in, and you can do sometimes limited things with those goods before you pay the duty to help with cash flow. So I'll be looking at those and how you could take advantage of them. I mentioned during the insurance a few minutes ago, the packaging side, the pallets, and everything around insurance and things that you need to consider, even down to the Ever Given when it got stuck in a Suez Canal a few years ago now. The problems that when a vessel declares general average, that comes under insurance, and you have to pay to get your goods released, which is all part of the costs of repairing the vessel when it's been damaged. But again, it's understanding all of these things so that you don't get caught out. And ensuring safe imports and exports. And these are very much designed for businesses where you don't have a dedicated logistics team or person. It's been an add-on to someone's job, and they look back at the previous job. What did we do on the last order? Well, that's fine if you did it right last time. And of course, if things haven't changed, as I just mentioned, we're in a world where things are constantly changing around international trade, and it's hard for us to keep up with it, and we're doing it every day. So someone where it's a bolt on to their job can't be expected to know everything that's changing and that they need to know to make sure that they're not making mistakes, those avoidable mistakes on your exports and your imports, the goods you sell and the goods that you purchase. Now, the investment for this is 597 plus VAT, and the first one starts next Thursday on the 11th of January. I do them every quarter, but for everyone who's part of the webinar today, I am doing a special offer as a thank you for joining me today of 397 plus VAT. The promo code is LM200, and I'm also giving a special bonus to the first 5 companies that sign up, and I will work with you I'll give you 2 hours of my time to work on any challenge you've got around your international logistics, just to help you generally on anything that you want me to look at that will help you move forward, or that's causing you a challenge. And I do give a full money back guarantee on these workshops. I'll allow everybody to attend all 10. And if anybody comes back to me and says that they don't feel that they've had £397 worth of value from those workshops, I will give you a full refund. The only thing I do ask for is that you're honest with me and tell me why you don't feel that they've been worth the investment that you've made. But there is, say, a full money back guarantee on it. Now, an email is coming out tomorrow. I know I've put the information on this slide. An email's coming out and a LinkedIn message tomorrow with the Eventbrite link for anybody that is interested. Along with that will be the link for the roadmap template I've put together, the information on completing export paperwork, and I've gone through everything you need on an invoice, what needs to go on a packing list, and then information on things like bills of lading, airway bills, which ones you need, certificates of origin, quite a few of the common documents that you would be using for exports, depending where you're sending to in the world. So that's all on that document, and you will be sent the copy of that tomorrow as well. I would very much urge you to speak to your freight forwarders about the Red Sea situation, and if not, I will be putting out regular updates on my LinkedIn. I think everybody on this webinar today has come from my LinkedIn, but if you're not, please, again, it's there on the slide and it will be on tomorrow's email. Please do connect with me. I put some great stuff out, some really useful information for exporters and importers, and I will be keeping you updated on what's happening in the Red Sea and how it's going to affect you. So if there's any questions, unfortunately, because of the format, because it's streaming live, I don't get to see the questions. But if you've got any questions, would you please put them into the comments for me? And then I will see them afterwards, and I will come back to everybody that's got any questions. If you've got anything specific from today's webinar, any questions from that, anything about the workshops that start next week, again, ask me that. Or indeed, if you've got anything else that's a real challenge for you now, just let me know that as well. And because of the number of years I've worked in international trade, if I don't know the answer, there's a very good chance I know somebody who does because of all of my connections. So if I can help, I definitely will. So I think we've finished a few minutes early because I was expecting I'd be able to answer questions. So I guess I'm going to let you all go. You're sort of 5-10 minutes early. So I've even given you back a bit of time from today as well. So thank you. Thank you to everybody. Really appreciate you attending. Take care. Bye-bye.